Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. Recently, there have been more interactions among China, Japan, and South Korea, which has started to make the United States worried. One of the core issues between China and Japan is the matter of history. Recently, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba spoke at the 30th International Forum for the Future of Asia, saying we must always remember the painful memories and lessons of history and never repeat the mistakes of war. After the war, Japan has taken the path of being a peaceful nation, and this will not change in the future. Based on reflecting on its past history, Japan will not become an aggressor country. Some commentators have said that Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's remarks show a positive attitude towards reflecting on history and preventing the recurrence of war. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian responded by saying that China attaches great importance to Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's further statement that Japan should reflect on its history, remember the lessons of the past, and never repeat the mistakes of war. He said that recognizing and dealing with history with the right attitude and demonstrating genuine reflection and apology for the war of aggression through concrete actions are important prerequisites for Japan's return to the international community after the war. This concerns the political foundation of China-Japan relations, Japan's relations with its neighboring countries, and Japan's international image. China hopes that Japan will deeply reflect on its historical responsibilities, earnestly learn lessons from history, and, with a responsible attitude towards history, the people, and the future, make a complete break with any actions that glorify or cover up the history of aggression. Japan should firmly adhere to the path of peaceful development and win the trust of its Asian neighbors and the international community through concrete actions. Shigeru Ishiba's statement will definitely help further improve China-Japan relations. The shift in Japan's relatively hostile attitude towards China in recent years is actually also due to Trump recklessly wielding tariffs and disrupting the global supply chain. Japan and South Korea, the so-called American allies in Asia, have been deeply affected. If they continue to confront China alongside the US, both countries' economies will face even more difficult situations. After South Korea went through the farce of Yoon Suk-yeol's remarks, the country completed its presidential election, with Lee Jae-myung from the opposition Democratic Party being elected as the new president. The U.S. response, as usual, couldn't help but be suspicious of China. White House officials told Reuters that although South Korea held a free and fair election, the U.S. still worries about what they call Chinese interference and its influence on democracies around the world. Lee Jae-myung has previously shown a moderate attitude towards China on multiple occasions. At the final press conference before the South Korean election on June 2, Lee Jae-myung, when asked about trade and relations with China, said that if elected, he would pursue a pragmatic foreign policy, and that it is necessary to build friendly relations with China, Japan, Russia, and the United States alike. He also said that the South Korea-US alliance is the foundation of South Korea's diplomacy and will continue to be strengthened. Obviously, the United States has realized that Lee Jae-myung is not the kind of politician like Yoon Suk-yeol, who is willing to be the vanguard of America's anti-China stance. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded by saying that China has always adhered to the principle of non-interference in internal affairs and has never interfered in the internal affairs of any country. China advises the U.S. to stop projecting its own behavior onto China and to stop sowing discord in China-South Korea relations. In conclusion, Trump has further torn off America's hypocritical mask, and even if he keeps playing up the China threat narrative, it won't hold water anymore. Because for Japan and South Korea, the biggest threat right now actually comes from U.S. tariffs and uncertainty. On the other hand, as Trump faces China's firm stance in defending its own interests during negotiations, his anxiety is only growing. It's just like the period after President Trump started the tariff war back in April. These past few days, White House Press Secretary Leavitt, White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett and other officials from the Trump administration have been loudly telling the media that they want to communicate with China, and that a call is about to take place. On June 3, Politico published an article saying that the message spread by Trump's team was meant to cover up the current predicament facing the U.S., trying to pressure China to return to the negotiating table, but at the same time not wanting to cause long-term political damage at home. This has once again raised doubts from the outside world. In this trade war, which has increasingly turned into a game of chicken over who will blink first, what exactly does Trump want? The article quoted an anonymous insider as saying that the Trump administration is now under tremendous pressure, because China has made it clear that it is unwilling to export more rare earths and other critical minerals to the U.S. Daniel Russell, the former Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs under the Obama administration. Russell said China has a keen sense of weakness. Although Trump acts very tough and blustery, he also shows a kind of eagerness, even a desperate willingness, to reach a direct deal with China, and this only strengthens China's resolve. When asked whether the leaders of China and the U.S. would have a phone call this week, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said on the 3rd that there was no information to provide. And just the day before, when responding to questions about the consensus reached at the China-US Geneva Economic and Trade Talks, a spokesperson from China's Ministry of Commerce condemned the U.S. for unilaterally and continuously provoking new economic and trade frictions, which increases the uncertainty and instability of bilateral economic and trade relations. Politico believes that this shows China is not willing to easily reconcile with the U.S. In early May, after China and the U.S. reached a series of important consensuses on economic and trade issues in Geneva, Switzerland, the Trump administration introduced new restrictive measures against China while at the same time accusing China of violating the consensus and delaying the resumption of exports of critical minerals and rare earths. Less than 24 hours after announcing the consensus with China in Geneva, the U.S. Department of Commerce warned American companies not to use chips produced by Chinese tech company Huawei, saying that using these chips would violate U.S. export control regulations. After that, the U.S. further tightened AI chip exports to China, stopped selling chip design software (EDA) to China, revoked the visas of Chinese students, and so on. After doing all this, the U.S. then turned around and accused China of breaking the consensus. Last week, U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai stated on CNBC that the U.S. and China had agreed in Geneva to remove tariff and non-tariff barriers, but when it came to some countermeasures, China slowed down its actions. Foreign media generally believe that the recent frantic actions of the Trump administration are because they feel the pressure from China's rare earth export controls, and they are trying to shift this pressure onto China. Last week, the New York Times reported that the U.S. Department of Commerce has suspended some sales of aviation technology to China in response to China's controls on the export of critical minerals. American car manufacturers have already started issuing warnings, saying that the rare earth supply shortage caused by China's export controls could force them to halt production and shut down factories. Electric motors in cars require a large amount of rare earths, and factory robots also need rare earths to operate. Nazak Nikokter, former Assistant Secretary of Commerce under Trump and now a partner at Wiley Rain LLP in Washington, pointed out that this is a fatal weakness for the United States. According to a New York Times report on June 2, nearly 90% of the world's annual production of 200,000 tons of high-performance rare earth magnets comes from China. Although China has been working hard to issue export licenses, the global supply of rare earths is rapidly decreasing. Some Chinese rare earth magnet manufacturers have already stopped production to wait for the issuance of licenses. The shortage in magnet production is spreading through the supply chain and could soon affect manufacturers. Michael Dunn, a consultant who closely follows China's automotive industry, said that China could bring American car assembly plants to a standstill. As China imposes export controls on rare earths and other critical minerals, and with no quick solution in sight, some global car manufacturers have joined their American counterparts in voicing their complaints about the situation. According to a Reuters report on June 3, after an Indian electric vehicle manufacturer voiced similar complaints last week, a German automotive industry organization became the latest group to speak out about the impact of China's export controls. Hildegard Müller, president of the German Association of the Automotive Industry, said that if the current situation does not change quickly, it will be impossible to rule out the possibility of delays or even interruptions in German car production. In a statement to Reuters, he said that from umbrella motors to brake sensors, the automotive industry relies on rare earth magnets, and the sector may find it difficult to maintain smooth production operations. He added that China has already issued some licenses to a few rare earth producers, including suppliers to Volkswagen, but this is not enough to ensure an adequate supply of parts needed for smooth production. The report said that this is the German Association of the Automotive Industry clearly stating that China's export controls could trigger the risk of production stoppages, but no specific timeline was given. Meanwhile, Bosch, the world's largest automotive parts supplier, said in May this year that the new Chinese regulations have affected suppliers, but declined to comment further. As for Mercedes-Benz, in a written statement, the company said it is closely assessing and monitoring the situation, and stated that there has been no direct impact on Mercedes-Benz at this time. Volkswagen, on the other hand, did not immediately comment. The report also pointed out that from Tokyo to Washington, China's export controls have caused a strong shock at both the corporate board and government levels in various countries. Officials are urgently looking for limited alternatives, worried that the production of products like new cars could come to a halt before this summer. Diplomats from India, Japan, and Europe, as well as executives from car manufacturers and other industries, are urgently seeking meetings with Chinese officials to push for faster approval of rare earth magnet exports. To sum up simply, China's control over rare earth exports has indeed drawn attention from related industries worldwide, and it also serves as a warning, reminding the governments behind these companies not to think that following the US in suppressing China comes without a price. The current situation is that the US is provoking a trade war against China, and China's countermeasures are to protect its own interests. If companies from other countries want to complain, they should go and put pressure on Trump.